Okay, we're moving on now to what I find actually a semi-difficult card to talk about, the Three of Wands. And I actually, in all honesty, really don't know why this card confuses me so much, or not necessarily confuses me, but I always feel like I'm missing something about it, like I'm missing some sort of overall doctrine about the Three of Wands. Um, but I'll talk about it anyway. So we have in the number three, the three, of course, is associated with the divine feminine, as expressed in the supernal triangle, Binah or Bina. Again, you guys know my Hebrew is not up to snuff. Um, which is, of course, the idea of understanding. And with understanding, if wisdom, there's a huge difference between wisdom and understanding. Wisdom, being the masculine, is simply uh, wisdom is simply how do you explain wisdom? Wisdom is simply an energy in a way. It's simply a force. There's not anything that really says much about it. It's simply knowledge. It's simply the power of knowledge. As they say, knowledge is power. Whereas understanding is the ability to actually do something with that wisdom. You can't really use wisdom properly until you understand it, right? Um, and I think the same thing is applicable here. That energy of Keter, of the supernal triad, of the divine masculine, cannot actually be made into anything until it is understood. And to understand something means that you understand its its whole its wholeness, that you understand all of its subparts, I think. Um, that you're able to know the difference between what it is and what it is not. I think that is why the number three and Bina is so associated with duality. Um, in Kabbalah we say that Bina is of course the great mother of life and the mother of death. She's both sweet and beautiful and bitter and destructive. Um, and so the feminine has this weird duality about it, and I think it does go back to the idea of what the difference between understanding and wisdom is. Wisdom can be seen as just a single unit, which is why the masculine is associated with unity, whereas the feminine, if it's associated with understanding, understanding um, requires more. It requires greater analysis, I think, and um, it requires it's so difficult to talk about. Um, I always see it as requiring to know the difference between what it is and what it is not. I mean, I think that's kind of what we're getting at here. To know that um, that force, that the force of the Two of Wands is different from the force of the Two of Cups. That to understand that there is an actual difference between them, because of course in the supernal triangle everything is very cohesive and there is no division in the supernal triangle. Everything is unity. There's that famous Aleister Crowley quote saying, "For above the abyss there is no." Oh shoot, there is no division. That division is an expression of unity. Anything that is an opposite actually is an expression of unity in the supernal triangle. And I think that Bina really espouses that idea that, Bina being the great womb of everything, Bina knows the difference between one thing and the other. Even though they are the same thing, there is a subtle difference between them. And by understanding that, you are able to create something that is different from another thing. Um, really kooky, and I can't really explain it all any better than that. But with the three, we do get this idea of formation in a better sense. We get the idea of the two as made into a more holistic idea. It defines the real essence, the real form that that energy is going to take in. So the Three of Wands, in many ways, is a vessel for the Two of Wands. It is the form that the Two of Wands actually takes. And so if the Two of Wands is all about boldness and strength of character and power and masculine creative force, the Three of Wands is the feminine complement of that. It is the feminine being made pregnant, really. It's the fertilization of the feminine. It is the um, sort of with the sun and Aries being its astrological attribution, there are a lot of ideas associated with birth and pregnancy in the Three of Wands. At least for me, the sun is of course a card that is traditionally associated with childbirth and fertility in a maternal sense. And coupled with Bina, we do get this idea of fertility and whatever creative happenings have been happening between the ace and the two are now solidified into some specific form. And the title of this card is interesting, and I think that's what always trips me up about it, is that it's called Virtue, the Lord of Virtue. And it isn't the Lord of Fertility, it isn't the Lord of Logistics, it's the Lord of Virtue, which implies that there is a pride about the whole thing, that there is a strength of character throughout the Three of Wands that is not necessarily present prior to it. That the strength, excuse me, the strength and boldness of the two is characterized ultimately and understood to be an expression of good character. Um, and the feminine responds very well to it, if that makes sense. So, yeah, so the Three of Wands really represents, um, in a divinatory way. I see the Three of Wands as always representing someone making plans. That's usually what it comes up as for me. It usually represents not necessarily egotism or pride or anything like that, but it usually represents someone who is um, basically putting things in place so as to make some project of theirs come into being. That it is not necessarily the work being finished by any means. The work is not finished. It's in many ways the real beginning of the work. The real start of it. But it is a big step forward, and it will continue to move forward. Going into the future. It often comes up associated with future planning, planning for the future, having an eye on the future, having an idea of where one is going, what one wants to do with themselves, or a project or a job, career, etc. And yeah, that's kind of about it. So that card is pretty simple actually. I think more philosoph. It's a little difficult philosophically in some ways, but all the threes, in my opinion, are a little tricky to get around. So next we'll do the Four of Wands.